We're going to start snoozing. So my first question, Ted Bundy left little physical evidence. What was the defining scientific evidence that eventually led to his conviction? Was it fingerprints, criminal profiling, DNA evidence, or bite mark evidence? Anybody think they know this one? I hope so. He was big time when I was young and very interested in this field. So I know quite a bit about Ted Bundy. And I also know a lot of the investigators who actually worked with him, interviewed him, interrogated him, whatever you want to call it. And people were responsible for his actual being caught in the end. So yeah, it's a personal interest to me. Second question, what crucial physical evidence, photographed but not collected, from the Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman crime scene would have directly ID'd the killer? A fingerprint found in a bowl of ice cream found at the scene? Bloody footwear impressions found near the gate? The second bloody glove found near Cato's bungalow? Or a drop of blood on Cole's back? Anyone think they got this one? Yeah? Is this too easy? It is? Ooh, that's scary. Ready? You're still thinking. What crucial evidence was missing in the Casey Anthony case that ultimately led to her acquittal in the murder of her daughter, Kaylee? The duct tape found on Kaylee's mouth directly matching the duct tape found in the Anthony's home. The prosecution could not prove that Kaylee had accidentally drowned in the Anthony's pool. There was no DNA or fingerprints directly linking Casey to her daughter's death. And the chloroform found in the trunk of Casey's car could not be scientifically proven to have been used to subdue Kaylee. Which I spelled incorrectly, by the way. It's C-A-Y-L-E-E. Anyone think they know this one? I'll give you a minute on this one. How you guys doing? Good? Yeah. Ready? What is the origin of the name Jack the Ripper? The killer ripped up old newspapers and sprinkled them over the face of his victims? A. B. Someone claiming to be the killer wrote letters to a newspaper and signed them Jack the Ripper? C. An anonymous report to police was made about a suspicious demolition expert named Jack? Or D. The press picked it up from a pub song, popular pub song at the time? Anyone think they might have this one? Maybe? Is it a little harder? I hope. Ready? Which serial killer was known as the Milwaukee Cannibal? Ivan the Terrible? Jeffrey Dahmer? Hannibal Lecter? Alton Coleman? The Milwaukee Cannibal. Do we have anybody from that area? No? Good. Are we good? Okay. Which serial killer aided the Green River Task Force by profiling the Green River Killer and offering his insights into a murderer's mind, a serial killer's mind? Eddie Gein? A. B, David Berkowitz, C, Ted Bundy, or D, John Wayne Gacy? Anyone know this one, I think? Yeah? Don't give it away if you do. Ready? What type of evidence was used to convict Scott Peterson of the murder of his pregnant wife, Lacey? The type of evidence. Circumstantial evidence, mostly related to his behavior before and after the crime. B, a hair found on a pair of pliers in his boat. Several homemade anchors found with his boat. Or an eyewitness claimed to have seen the suspect carry a large duffel bag from his truck to his boat. Do you remember this one from the presentation? You were there? Okay. This is Scott Peterson, not to be confused with Drew Peterson, not to be confused with Michael Peterson, because we had a bunch of Petersons killing their wives for a couple of years there in the U.S., and they were pretty imaginative, they're very interesting cases, and none of them, they were not related to one another. This one, Scott Peterson was the fertilizer salesman. His wife was pregnant. He had a girlfriend, one of many. Next, ready? On February 16th, 2005, a Wichita television station received a padded envelope from the BTK killer that contained which of the following? Anyone live in the Kansas, that area at that time, or know this case? Okay. BTK. A letter covered with thumbprints made from red ink and an unidentified item. A postcard, 4 buttons, and a gold beret. A letter, a necklace, and a computer disk. Or cut out letters that when you put them together spelled blind, torture, kill. Anyone think they have this one? Yeah? Everyone? Okay.
Yeah, because they think it's fun.
So this is BTK, Dennis Rader. Police were able to obtain a search warrant to search John Wayne Gacy's house after what event? For John Wayne Gacy? Neighbors reported screams coming from his home late at night. That's A. B, Gacy's last victim escaped and reported the attack to police. That's B. Gacy invited the police into his home and they noticed a suspicious odor. That's C. And D, police found a pair of bloody socks in Gacy's trash can. You do know that when you leave stuff out in the trash, that's evidence for us. We can take whatever we want if it's out in the public domain. All set? Is it the last question? Claimed to have been with John Bonet when she died, but was excluded due to a failure to match DNA evidence. John Wayne Gacy, A, B, John Mark Carr, C, Richard Ramirez, or D, Gary Ridgway? Anybody need a little more time? No? Okay. Let's see if we can get this. Oops. Okay. So here's your moment of Zen.
That was beautiful.
Sometimes you gotta wash that stuff away. I should have a picture of my little dog up here, my Yorkshire Terrier, because that would melt everybody. Okay, ready? Ted Bundy left little. What was the scientific evidence, or what was the defining scientific evidence that eventually led to his conviction? Fingerprints? Nope. He never left us any fingerprints. He was pretty smart. He actually would go into his car car, into his house, his apartments. Even when he decapitated women and brought their heads back and washed their hair, and he just would wipe everything down. He was pretty smart. How about that? Criminal profiling? Nope. DNA evidence? Nope. There's the bite mark evidence. And the very last, the next to the last murders he committed in Chi Omega, and I said Chi Omega the other day, and that's wrong, I just mispronounced it. It's Chi Omega in Florida. He, in a frenzy, bit one of his victims on her butt and left these perfect bite mark evidence. So as you can see, he has some pretty unusual teeth, pattern, and it was just a beautiful match. You know, the first time bite mark evidence was ever used in a trial was in the Salem witch trials, when the young girls were claiming that the demons were biting them. And it was used very, very rudimentarily, of course, you know. They didn't really know what they were doing, but that's when they were starting to notice that they kind of looked small, like the girls, you know, the bite marks, things like that. Nothing was ever really proved from them, but that was the first time that was ever actually used in a court. So there's Ted with some girl between 74 and 78, 7 states, 35 plus victims. We believe really in the 90s is much more likely. And he may have started much younger when first victim being a little girl went missing when she was 8 and he was 15 and he was a local paper boy. But he would never admit to that one. He said that he didn't want to talk about some things that were, some people that were too young. That was his answer. So there he is with his girlfriend's little girl, a girlfriend that he had throughout the whole killing, and the book that she wrote, Phantom Prince, about what it was like to find out that for all the last few years when you've been dating somebody that he'd been murdering all these people and not putting it together. And she felt very responsible for that and ended up becoming an alcoholic, and she went through a really tough time. She's recovered now, but you can imagine the responsibility that she felt on her shoulders after that. So what crucial physical evidence, photographed but not collected from the Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman crime scene, would have directly ID'd the killer? You guys all have that one, right? Yes. Fingerprint found in a bowl of ice cream, found at the scene. Actually, there was a fingerprint. There was a bowl of ice cream that was partially melted. I don't know how it ever stayed not completely melted, but it just had a little bit of consistency to it. And there was a print on there, but we were never able to identify that. Bloody footwear impressions found near the gate. There was plenty of bloody footwear impressions belonging to not only the person responsible for the crime, but also half of the police force and evidence people who came. There was a lot of walking around the scene and walking through the blood and messing things up. A second bloody glove found near Cato's bungalow? No, but would have been a good answer, because there was a second bloody glove found there. But it was collected, of course. So it was a drop of blood on Nicole's back. And I showed this picture before, and I apologize for how graphic it is, but it's important. So all of this blood, we know from physical analysis, from blood spatter studying, we know what things are a spatter, we know how they occurred pretty much. We can do all this physical analysis, but we know up here from the picture that there's a couple spots of blood up there that came from the trajectory of it, when this is blown up, way blown up much more, that they came from above, from this person who slit her throat. They were not collected. She was put in a body bag, brought to the ME's office, and washed off after the photographs were taken at the scene. So this is evidence that does us no good, and it's kind of frustrating, actually. So that you can imagine there was a lot of blood at that scene all around between Nicole and Ron, and there's OJ at the end with his dream team, who managed to just be better lawyers, pretty much, and got this conviction he was not convicted, he was acquitted. So what crucial evidence was missing in the case of Casey Anthony? Remember that case in Florida, and the mother whose child went missing? And was missing for a little while, and then her body was found in a swamp right down the street from their house, actually. So what crucial evidence was missing in the Casey Anthony case that ultimately led to Casey's acquittal in the murder of her daughter, Kaylee? The duct tape found on Kaylee's mouth directly matching the duct tape found in the Anthony's home. Actually, the duct tape did match. It was a match, but duct tape matching. So we know if you rip a piece of duct tape off a roll, and we can find the roll at your house, pretty much we know that that roll came from there. It's not exact. It's not like DNA or fingerprints, but we can look at the threads and we can see how something was ripped. It's one other piece of the puzzle, and a pretty compelling one. They actually did have that evidence. The prosecution couldn't prove that Casey had accidentally drowned in Anthony's pool. Well, that ended up being the defense after a while. She said, oh, the baby drowned. My father was taking care of her, and she drowned under his care. So they couldn't prove that. Well, they really couldn't prove that. So that's evidence, I guess, of a sort. The chloroform found in the trunk of Casey's car could not be scientifically proven to have been used to subdue Kaylee. Well, there was chloroform found in her car. There was a huge debate about that chloroform. Actually met the guy who did the testing, who took it out of there and did the testing, and we had other experts came forward and said, well, that's a chemical residue that can leach out of carpet anyway, blah, 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 and it doesn't prove anything. Well, if it's there, it's pretty damaging evidence, but it wouldn't be the defining piece of evidence, because you wouldn't know that, you wouldn't be able to connect that, make that perfect linkage, right, between the Casey and Kaylee. So there was no DNA or fingerprints directly linking Casey to her daughter's death. They had upped the stakes pretty high. They thought they had a slam dunk case, and they could not prove it that way. It just could not be proven that way. So she ended up being acquitted. So here is the piece of tape that was on her mouth, which also I showed at previous presentations. It had a little heart on it. That's one thing that we look for when we, not for little hearts, but we look for things that show that a person cared about their victim. That can help us, part of the puzzle, things like that. But there was no DNA and there were no fingerprints on it. So it didn't matter. There was no direct connection, direct linkage. So we could not charge her with homicide. What is the origin of the name Jack the Ripper? Does anyone think they know this one? The killer ripped up old newspapers and sprinkled them over the face of his victim. That is actually how we usually term people, by something that they do, something that we call it like their signature. There's something they do, and we have been killers who have killed people and ripped stuff up, but that is not what connected Jack the Ripper. That's not where the name came from. An anonymous report to police was made about a suspicious demolition expert named Jack. Well, that's true. That did happen, but that's not the origin of Jack the Ripper. The press picked it up from a popular pub song. Well, popular songs were made after that, just like when Ted Bundy was electrocuted, and they made drinks in the bar, and they had all kinds of songs, Burn Bundy Burn, things like that. People do stuff like that. But in this case, someone claiming to be the killer wrote letters to the newspaper and signed them Jack the Ripper. Anybody get that one? Probably a lot of you, right? Yeah, Jack the Ripper, many killers, they take little breaks, but then they're always in communication with the newspaper or the police. They love that. They love to immerse themselves in the investigation. They like to taunt and tease, and they'll send like little clues. And so he would send these letters like this, and they had some pretty interesting graphics on them, and he would sign them Jack the Ripper. So that's how he became known, and as Jack the Ripper from the newspaper, from the media sources. But he did write many letters to the newspapers, just trying to give them hints, because that was part of the game. And which serial killer was known as the Milwaukee Cannibal? Anybody get this one, they think? Yeah. Ivan the Terrible? Well, no. He was a violent Russian Tsar. He supposed to kill between, oh my God, many, many people. He admitted to about, I think, 4,000, but it was more like 70 or 80,000 in his reign of terror over the years. Hannibal Lecter, Silence of the Lambs. Hannibal Lecter's real name, well, the person that the idea came from, was Albert Fish, and he used to stick needles in himself to own person. He loved pain. He loved to inflict pain on himself and also as well as others. Alton Coleman, no, he was a guy who went on this big killing spree with his girlfriend. They just decided, yeah, I was going to drive cross country and just kill people. And he did. But the Milwaukee Cannibal, was Jeffrey Dahmer. He mutilated and murdered 18 black and Asian gay men in the 80s. And he actually had one who escaped. He would drug them, and then he would take advantage of them. And sometimes he would try to cut pieces of their head off without them being dead. This one guy escaped, and he was running down the street naked. A young man, he was 16 or so. The police picked him up and brought him back to his house. And Jeffrey Dahmer said, oh, we just had a lover's spat, and he ran off, and they just left him there. And he ended up being one of the victims. So that was a horrible, stupid mistake made by the police, but it was made. So here's Ivan the Terrible up here, and of course we have Hannibal Lecter and Albert Fish. He loved to kill children. That was his thing, and he would brag about that. They're tasty. That's what he would say. So there's a lot of crazy people in this world. And on the bottom left is Alton Coleman and his girlfriend, and here's Jeffrey Dahmer right here. He was later killed in prison. Even prisoners don't like certain kind of people, and after a while they take care of them. So which serial killer aided the Green River Task Force by profiling the Green River Killer and offering insight into his mind? You guys got this one right? Yeah. Eddie Gein? No. Eddie Gein was the real Buffalo, he was a prototype for the real Buffalo Bill from the Silence of the Lambs, right? The guy who had made the women's suits out of skin, and also for Norman Bates in Psycho. This person used to, from Wisconsin, he would exhume bodies, he would collect body parts, and he would make household items with them. Yeah. Eddie Gein, he was a nice guy. David Berkowitz, that was the son of Sam killer, a 44 caliber killer. He killed couples. He would go up to their cars and just shoot them. And he said that the dog next door howling and barking was telling him to do that. That was why he did these things. And John Wayne Gacy, no, he was a killer clown. He killed at least 30 men in the Chicago area. He was in construction, he was in politics, he was in a lot of things. So he met a lot of young men, and he would take them home, and he would play this game with handcuffs and things, and then he would get them and kill them, and he would bury them in his cellar. And he was married, and he would just cover them with lime to cover up the smell. Ted Bundy, and he's the answer, the origin of the name serial killer. When the Green River Killer was at his height, Ted Bundy was in jail, and he was just so frustrated that this guy was like outdoing him in numbers and everything else. So he called somebody Robert Keppel, and who worked in the Green River Task Force, and he said, I'll help you find this guy because, it takes one to know one. And at first, Keppel is disgusted with his superiors, and they're like, no way, we're not playing a game with a serial killer who we know is a serial killer. Then after a while, they had lost so many women, all prostitutes, mostly prostitutes, and he just said, okay, let's see what we can get from him. And they have hours and hours and hours, thousands of hours of tapes of Ted Bundy helping them to profile the Green River Killer. A lot of it was BS, according to Dr. Keppel, on Bundy's part. He just really wanted to see the crime scene pictures. He wanted to immerse himself in the crime. He was bored. He'd been bored when he was in jail. But he did give them one tip about stalking out places where a body had been left, and how the killers will come back to that spot over and over again, and that ended up being quite true. So he did give some pretty interesting insight into serial killers in general. But he did help. He was actually very helpful in this case, solving this case. So there he is, Gary Ridgway up here. He had a little 2-year-old son, and he'd show the prostitutes the picture of his son and say, see, you know, my wife doesn't understand me. I'm bored, I need something more, but see, I'm a father, I'm safe. And John Wayne Gacy up here, and Eddie Gein, who would make things with parts. I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. Ted Bundy when he has a little tantrum. And of course, Ted Bundy over here says, we serial killers are your sons, we're your husbands, we're everywhere. That's pretty frightening. And David Berkowitz, the one who was killing the couples, hearing voices from the dog. So here's some pictures of, again, sorry for the graphic, but it's an apron made out of skin, gloves made from the skin of the hands of a person, and just some things that were found in his house. So he would steal body parts from he also murdered a couple of women, but mostly he would steal body parts from the cemetery and bring them home and make his own creations. We can actually do this at the bottom here. Sometimes we do that when we have a drowning victim and we can't get good prints. We'll actually slip the whole hand of skin off and put a glove on, and then put it over our own hand to take prints, so we have some strength behind the print, so you can get the ridge impression. So he was a little ahead of his time, or he could have been a CSI, I don't know. Some of Ted Bundy's victims. What type of evidence was used to convict Scott Peterson in the murder of his pregnant wife, Lacey? Hair found on a pair of pliers in his boat. There was a hair found on a pair of pliers in his boat, and it was her hair. But there's always the chance that, you know, hey, it's his wife. Maybe she was in the boat, and one of her hairs fell out. We lose tons of hairs every day. Some more than others, but we lose a lot of hairs every day. So that could not be used in that capacity. Several homemade anchors were found with his boat. Well, actually it was shown that he had made 5 homemade anchors and only 1 was left, so the rest had been taken, used up, and they were not there. They were no longer there. So, but it doesn't mean anything, right? It's one little thing. An eyewitness claimed to have seen him carry a large duffel bag from a truck to his boat. That's not true. No one did ever say that. But circumstantial evidence, mostly related to his behavior before and after the crime. When his girlfriend, Amber Fry, realized that this pregnant woman missing was her boyfriend, who she thought was a widower. He had told her that he had been married once, but his wife had died tragically. I don't want to talk about it. It's so upsetting. That basically was his attitude. And she sees all of this on television, and she's like, oh my God. And she calls the police, and they said, would you be willing to tape your conversations? And she agreed. So basically, the taped conversations here, there were quite a few of them. I mean, so she started collecting these, and they were pretty damning as far as circumstantial evidence, right? And here's one of the anchor that's left. These are pins, please find Lacey, that were from the candlelight vigil that he never passed out or brought anywhere. And there he is at the vigil. He looks really sad. So it's really his behavior that did him in. On February 16, 2005, a Wichita television station received a padded envelope from the BTK killer, and it contained which of the following? Anybody think they have this one? A letter covered with a thumbprint made from red ink and an unidentified item? Nope. A postcard, 4 buttons, and a gold beret? No, that was another case. cut out letters that when put together spell blind, torture, kill? No, because it's not blind, torture, kill, it's bind, torture, kill. That was a trick. But it was a letter, a necklace, and a computer disk. BTK, did anyone get that one right? Yeah? A couple of you? Good. BTK loved to write to the newspaper, or write to put ads in the newspaper, loved to send letters to the police. He would send all kinds of things, and often he would send like little dolls. And I'll show you a picture. So here's BTK up here. He was a constable, he was a dog catcher, he was a census taker. So he had all of these jobs which allowed him to go into people's houses, and then he would kind of like scope out the situation, and he would come back at another time. This here is a Barbie doll who's been suffocated. One of the pieces of evidence that he sent in, he would send these into the police station. And when the Otero family were murdered, he sent this in because this is how the young girl, he hung her up from a pipe in the basement. And he sent that picture there. And in the middle is a letter that he wrote, and he would give all these hints. He would give his initials, he would give all kinds of things. But in the end, he was getting a little annoyed that people weren't getting close enough to, of course he didn't want to get caught, but at the same time, you know, he was really like, wanted to be in the limelight. So he actually called the police station and said, if I send you a computer disk with some hints and stuff, will you be able to trace that back to me? And they said, no, of course not. And of course they did. And they traced it back to his church. And he was furious with that. He was furious with that because he had developed this kind of relationship with, especially with the chief of police, where he felt like he was like really in cahoots with him, and they playing this game and one-upping him. And he was like, seriously, you lied to me? And that's the truth. And they got the disc, they tied it back to the church. He was an elder in the church, and they tied it back to the church, and the other stuff happened to be from crime scenes, the necklace from a crime scene. So he was done deal. And on top of that, just right before that, right after that, the DNA evidence had been taken from a rape, one of his victims. He had raped them, and DNA evidence was taken, and they had that evidence now, and they were trying to match that up. So once they could arrest him here, then they could take that evidence, take his DNA, check it out again. I think they ended up getting a close match initially from his daughter, and then they went on to him. So there he is. If you ever want to see the most, probably, I believe that I've seen the most horrible confession, non-confession that I've ever seen somebody do, is to Google that on YouTube. He has no effect. He just, like, when he talks about murdering the Otero family, it's just like he's talking about changing his socks, or no emotion whatsoever. He was a pretty sick man, and he had a family throughout this whole time that he was doing this. So police were able to obtain a search warrant to search John Wayne Gacy's house after which event? Neighbors reported screams coming from his home late at night. Well, actually, people did report some screams over the years coming from his house. His last victim escaped and reported the attack to police. Well, actually, that was Dama. When one of the victims escaped and reported it, but they just brought him right back and handed him right over to Jeffrey Dahmer, who ended up killing him. Police found a pair of bloody socks in Gacy's trash can. Nope. He invited them in, and they had this talk, and they were chatting, because he knew a lot of these people that were missing, and his name came up, and they're just like, man, it reeks in here. This is really, really bad. So he was burying the bodies in his basement and covering them with lime. So he was married, so his wife was smelling this too. But that is exactly how that went to the next level of catching him. He had killed 33 plus young men and boys in Chicago in about a six-year period, 70s. The 70s was a bad time, actually. There was a lot of stuff going on in the 70s. So this was his house. Underneath there was a ton of bodies buried in lime, all young men. He liked to pose as a clown. He did children's parties as a clown. Right. Here he is with Rosalynn Carter. He was in politics. Yeah, this guy got around. Here he is, you know, the clown again. One thing interesting about his clown persona is most people, when they portray a clown, they round off the edges of the mouth because it's less sinister looking, but he just kept his pointy. And then in whoops, we'll go back to that one. And then in prison, he became quite an artist, and a lot of his memorabilia is up for sale. People have bought it. Some people have bought it just because they knew him, and it was just like, it's almost a purging way, a thing of doing, I don't know. And others just to destroy it, to have it and actually destroy it. So this is one couple pictures he drew did in prison. I mean, with the bloody hand here and the skeleton, the clown, but the clown with the skeleton, and the seven dwarfs. Weird. Yeah. But when you're in prison, you just like, there's many prisoners become good at something because they don't have anything else to do. You can still buy his art if you're interested. So, let's see. I think this is the last question. Claimed to have been with JonBenet when she died, but was excluded due to a failure to match DNA. John Wayne Gacy? No, we just talked about him. He was the killer clown. Richard Ramirez, he was the Night Stalker. Gary Ridgway, he was the Green River Killer. John Mark Carr. John Mark Carr said he had been with JonBenet, and that he was in love with her, she was in love with him, and that he had sexually taken her, and he said that, and they flew him back. He was in Asia at the time, living there. They flew him back here, did all this testing, because we did have, when JonBenet's underwear, took JonBenet's underwear, went to her mom and said, where did you buy these, and blah, blah, blah. She said that, and so they went to the store, bought the same ones, same size, a big package of them, a bunch of them, over a dozen of them, tested them all, and on 8 pairs, there was foreign DNA. So that was a big wake-up call for us. It wasn't no semen, there was no semen or anything like that, nothing in it, and it was not John Mark Carr's. It was not male DNA from a sexual attack, it was just DNA from what we call touch DNA, where you can actually leave the bits of DNA behind. So that was kind of a blow to us, because now we know that not necessarily when we get some DNA that it means anything, and it can get confused with a bunch of other people's DNA. It came actually from the manufacturing process, that DNA on JonBenet's underwear. So there he is. He ended up being charged later with as a pedophile, and then he got off on that, and then he got recharged again, and he ended up in jail. So that's the end of my questions. How do you guys feel? Did anybody get them all? 9? Anybody get 9? 8? No? 7? 7? Whoa. Give me your numbers. I might need you. Wow. 6? 6? Yeah. Great. Thank you. 5? That's probably more average. And less than 5? That's you guys are normal. Okay, so you guys are not to be, they should stand up so we know who not to be afraid of on this ship. And the 9s, yeah, be afraid of these ladies over here. What's that? Yeah, don't get in the lift with these ladies here. Or the pool at night, or the hot tub. Did you enjoy that? Okay, excellent, thank you so much. Was it too easy? No? It's too hard? Yeah. Did you like the explanations afterwards? Well, thank you so much, and hopefully I'll see you all tomorrow for the dingo case. We'll talk about the two sides, what the Crown said, or prosecution, and what the defense said, and what the evidence was, and the outcome. It's quite long, so I kind of have to move along with it, but we can chat forever afterwards if you want.
Awesome.
The wrong answer.